Good morning! Unless it's not. Has this ever happened to you? I like games. Well, worry not, this atrocity can be avoided, provided you limit your child's exposure to certain dangerous substances. Be warned, it will look like I am holding one in a moment, but it is just a trick of computer-generated images. Don't be fooled. Oh god!
I was a kid once. I know. I shouldn't brag. And back then, it was already too late for me. I was hooked. My earliest memory of video games is Super Smash Bros. Melee for the GameCube, but even back then, it's not like we were buying new video games all the time. And kids have terrible attention spans, so I would play a lot of different video games. Luckily for me, we happened to own a Super Nintendo. Even luckier, we didn't own an NES. That's right, ever since I can remember, I've been playing all the classics on Super Nintendo. And I don't know if games were just getting easier then, or if I just played so much that I got good at them, but I never struggled nearly as much with SNES games as I did with the NES. Of course, there were still challenges on the system for a young me. I doubt I made it more than halfway through A Link to the Past, but there is at least one good reason I believe my nostalgia made games easier. Yep. Donkey Kong Country. These games aren't easy by most standards, but I have memories of making it pretty far, even as a child. Perhaps the simple-to-understand gameplay helped out quite a bit, or maybe I just forgot the moments of my mother helping me.
Yay, I'm doing it!
And yet, Diddy's Conquest is one of the most difficult games I've beaten to this day. And, wouldn't you know it, we never owned that one. So after teaching myself how to count again, thanks, Mom, I realized that Donkey Kong Country 2 was finally available on the Nintendo Switch.
What? It took a while to learn.
So now that I've officially beaten all three, all I can ask is, why is this the one that's everyone's favorite? Again, I think it's harder for me because I didn't play it as a kid, but this game is hard. I had to abuse the shit out of the rewind feature. But I'll get into that more in a moment, because even though it's a hard game, it is still a gem from a trilogy of well-crafted platformers from Nintendo's early days. So back in the early days of human society, the 80s, video games were finally starting to gain some traction. Right when video games were about to die off forever, Nintendo came in with the NES in 1983 and announced to the whole world,
You're welcome.
So naturally, having jumped in at the point where video games were at their lowest, Nintendo was on top. On top of a literal pile of shit. Have you seen the end of the Atari's lifespan?
Well, at least it isn't E.T.
This is, of course, where many of Nintendo's franchises came to be. But it just wasn't enough for them. The NES could handle games, but it could only barely handle games. If they wanted to make something truly special, they would have to pioneer the way into a new generation of gaming. That's right, back in the day it was Nintendo looking into better graphics. They took video games from this to this. Super Mario World, Super Mario Kart, Yoshi's Island, Super Metroid, A Link to the Past. This console really was an unstoppable juggernaut. But it wouldn't be until 1994 that Nintendo would try to push their limits beyond what we could ever imagine. 3D gaming. Well, not exactly. If my video game college classes were to be believed, Donkey Kong Country was the first ever game to use pre-rendered 3D models in a 2D game. Naturally, the SNES couldn't handle full models, we've all seen Doom, but it could handle pictures of a 3D image. So basically, Donkey Kong is a flipbook of a much better, higher performance video game. Again, not exactly. The technology was revolutionary. The SNES was already an era where video games started to come into their own. I mean, most people could look at this and tell you exactly what they see.
Oh yeah, look, it's Chris Pratt.
But if you look up images of Donkey Kong and compare them side by side, it's like a whole different system. Of course, graphics have never been a big deal to me, but even I have to admit that what Nintendo did with some of their games was just downright impressive. It's amazing what Nintendo will do to save a buck. If Nintendo could have a dollar menu like a fast food restaurant, I'm sure they'd find a way. But one of the more standout parts of this franchise is that, to me, these are still some of the best 2D platformers ever created. and there's really not much here. In terms of controls, you can run, jump, and pick up barrels. Jumping on things tends to be bad for them, which is true to real life. Move from left to right.
That's why I'm over here now.
The concept and execution are amazingly simple. There are a couple of rideable animal paths that you collect later on, and a couple sections like minecart and swimming that mix things up, but the game is the epitome of a big thing in a small package. Every little detail is perfect in this game. The way the bonus sections work, how it's different if you're playing as Donkey Kong or Diddy Kong, the fake two-player modes, and most importantly, the soundtrack. I can't really say anything unique about the other two games' soundtracks because honestly, all three games blow it out of the park, but every piece is still recognizable as Donkey Kong. The music here is so good, even the water levels are good.
I may not be able to breathe, but I'm fine with this.
Even the things that were pretty standard for platformers at the time are made better in this game. You have 6 distinct worlds, but each one is just a part of the bigger Kong Island as a whole. As you climb up the mountain, you get closer to the industrial takeover by King K. Rool, and mine shafts are replaced with factories and fire. It's a nice touch, especially for such an early game. And considering Mario had already standardized the platformer level structure with its deserts and ice worlds, having a more cohesive world in Donkey Kong felt like a nice change of pace. And even for the first title in the franchise, each level was pushing the boundaries of that simple premise. No matter how far the game went, you still only jump and run, but so many levels throw in new concepts or push old concepts even further. You have the minecarts I mentioned before, a level where you need a bird with a flashlight to show the way, a level where you have to keep hitting these barrels to keep invincible enemies from moving around. Playing through this game for footage, I never wanted to stop recording because each level felt like something unique to share. But no matter how far the game took things, it still remained simple and intuitive. That, however, is when it all changed. For the better, I mean. Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Kong Quest released the next year in 1995, and if I had to sum it up quickly, I'd say this.
They're both small!
That's the sort of feeling this game has. Take everything from the original, but take away your comfort zone. This was a different era of video game. No matter how many Call of Duty games there are, each one will give you a tutorial. But Donkey Kong Country 2 said, remember the first game? Now do better. The world map is darker, the themes are different. This time instead of jungles and factories, you get pirate ships and a circus? You know, the standard monkey fare. Speaking of monkeys, this time the big ape has been kidnapped, so instead of controlling Donkey Kong, this time you take control of Diddy Kong and newcomer Dixie Kong, who stepped in to help Diddy save the day.
They're both small!
That's right, one of those perfect small details from the first game carried over to this one. See, there are bigger enemies that can only be defeated by Donkey Kong, and this time, you don't have him. It was possible to lose Donkey Kong and have to play as Diddy in the first game, and it's not a huge mechanic in this game either, so it's not the biggest deal.
I said I'm fine!
But unlike the change from Donkey Kong to Dixie Kong, this game decided to go bigger than the last. In addition to the 7 main worlds, there's an additional semi-secret world called the Lost World. In order to access this world, you have to earn Creme coins hidden throughout the regular stages. In order to get the true ending of the game, you'd have to hunt down every last coin and beat the Lost World stages as well. So the bonuses worked a bit different in this game, turning those mini challenges from before into ways to earn coins. And since you could only earn each coin once, the levels on the overworld now displayed exclamation points when you'd collected them all. There are also a new collectible, DK coins, hidden in every stage. While they do add to the percentage of the game file, and they have their own mark on the world map, they aren't necessary to get the true ending, which is good because they're difficult to find, and I did not grab them all. Although if you don't grab them all, Cranky won't admit you're a true hero, because somehow I guess true heroes seek gold. Whatever, this game was already hard enough. Of course, Cranky is talking to Diddy Kong this whole time, but the true hero is honestly the newcomer Dixie. See, while Donkey Kong could bash bigger baddies, Dixie can cheat. If you hold the run button after making a jump, Dixie will slowly hover to the ground, which makes precision platforming a bit easier. Of course, even with Dixie cheating, this game will do a mean impression of your parents.
If you want to cry, I'll give you something to cry about.
But enough. I've beaten the difficulty joke about as much as the difficulty beats me. The world map is a bit more fluid, and since I didn't talk about it in Donkey Kong Country 1, I have an excuse to talk about it more here. Levels are broken up like a traditional platformer. Move to a level, select it, beat the level, drink whenever you die.
My drinking games are the best.
But instead of freely moving around the entire world like in Super Mario World, the game is also divided into different sections of the overall map. In order to leave one of them and go back to another, you'll first have to reach the Funky Kong station in each world. It's an interesting way of doing it, except the save stations work the same way. So if you go to a new world and haven't reached Funky or Candy, who saves your game, you either have to beat enough levels to reach them, or go back to your last save next time you play. Cranky Kong also has stages scattered around the map, which serve little purpose aside from having him be cranky. I mean, he also cheats, but in a less fun way, telling you hints about where to find things in the game. Aside from Clubba's Kiosk, which are areas that lead to the Lost World, the only other difference in the second game is that Candy has been replaced with Cranky's wife, Wrinkly Kong. Oh, and I guess saving costs more of that currency that Cranky requires, but it's usually not enough to worry about.
And that wraps up the Donkey Kong Country trilogy. What's this? I'm hearing from my informant that the word trilogy means 3.
Holy crap, look at this game! I played so much Donkey Kong Country 3 growing up, and while I can understand why it isn't everyone else's favorite, I absolutely love this game. To be fair, at its core, this game is basically the same as the ones before it. Run, jump, get to the end. But just like the last game, it's building off of systems that were already great to make an innovative and unique gameplay experience. The original heavy and light dichotomy is back, but this time you can toss Kiddy Kong around and make him slam into weak spots on the ground. Special stages are back and revamped, with the Lost World being hidden and available on the Overworld, and what an overworld it is. You still need Funky Kong to get around, but this time it's because he gives you a boat and says go for it. Instead of progressing linearly from one world to the next, you're forced to explore the overworld and tackle the worlds as you reach them. Certain worlds provide upgrade materials, allowing Funky to upgrade your boat to reach more places. And these places are interesting on their own, with a few new level themes to spice things up, like sewers and the insides of trees, along with some interesting levels like ropes being lit on fire underneath you or low-gravity rail sections. It's like they took different level mechanics from the original games and then decided to mix them together for even more weirdness. And the overworld is easily the big feature that combines all of these things. There are loads of characters to give side quests and open new areas, and you can leave those areas whenever you want, which means past areas are always available to you. And to top it all off, they've used the world map to add another collectible, banana birds. Just like in the last game, you have your basic ending for beating the final boss, and an ending for tracking him down in the hidden world and beating him again. However, this time there's a third ending for collecting all the banana birds, and, well, I think it speaks for itself. Speaking of K. Rool's ultimate demise, for now, the boss fights in this game are my favorites by far. I think a lot of people would prefer Diddy's boss fights, which are probably a bit tougher, but I think the designs in this game are more interesting and the mechanics are a bit less straightforward. For one boss, you might be throwing beetles into his mouth to get him to belch.
As one does.
But another might have you controlling the new elephant character to shoot water at its weak points. Speaking of the elephant, while a lot of the most popular animal buddies return, and they did trim the fat on some of the less popular ones, there are only 2 new animal buddies in this game. Perry the Parallel Bird is pretty boring and basically just grabs a couple collectibles for you in certain stages. But Ellie the Elephant is probably the most well-utilized animal buddy in the whole series. There are stages where you have to overcome her fear of mice in order to progress, levels where you use her ability to reposition barrels to create bridges, levels where you climb waterfalls become recontextualized, because now there's loads of ammunition since she can suck up the water to fire back.
Is it obvious yet that I love this game?
While a lot of people probably prefer the second game in this franchise, it's all such a wonderful evolution of a game that was already really tight to begin with. The creators spent as much time as possible figuring out what worked and what didn't, and they constantly wanted ideas to be as fresh as possible. And while 3 is definitely my favorite, it's always a treat to replay through any of these games' levels, especially once you've learned them well and feel just how tight the moment-to-moment gameplay really is.
Well, now I understand how I ended up this way. I mean, I grew up with these games, at least 2 of them, and even today it's really hard not to be interested in just how everything was designed in this game. From the 3D models, to the music, to the ever-changing level themes. If you ever want to get somebody into platforming, these are the titles to show them. If they can get through all 3 without gaining a deep love for video games, I'd be impressed. Now run along. What, you want some sort of witty wrap-up from the beginning of the video? I'm a new man now, haven't you heard? If you want your silly, overarching stories, you'll have to go somewhere else. Or just wait a week.